Perfect. Let's see. All right. Well, hey, welcome everybody to this streaming event we're doing. I wanted to take this opportunity. Oh, gotta mute this side again. I want to take this opportunity to discuss some of the agenda or something that's on the agenda for this Saturday. So first of all, I'm Chris Knoll. I'm the chair of the Salt Lake County Republican Party. I also have Karma Brown on with me right now, and she is the secretary of the Salt Lake County Republican Party. So thank you for joining, Karma. I'm going to be talking about what is going this bylaw, this amendment bylaw that we are going to be voting on this Saturday.
It looks like we lost Chris. Hang on and we'll get him back. So hold on just 1 second.
Okay, can you hear me again?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Sorry. That's what I get for trying to do two things at once. I accidentally turned off the live streaming on my side. So anyway. So yeah, we're going to be talking about this bylaw that I'm actually putting forward. So this the bylaw is intended to help change the party in a way that I think is for the benefit of the party. So it's called the Amendment for Fair Representation and Party Effectiveness. So really, there's two things that I'm trying to accomplish with this. One is I'm trying to improve the fairness of the representation. And what I mean by that is right now, there is an imbalance of representation. And this imbalance is when we have delegates who represent maybe just one person. There's literally 10 precincts in Salt Lake County where one delegate represents one person. And then the other end of the spectrum is there are places, precincts where there's delegates who represent about 325 registered Republicans. So there's an imbalance there. So when they go to convention, there are these delegates who represent themselves basically in this precinct. There's nobody else in the precinct except for them, and they just became the delegate because they showed up to caucus. Well, that's an imbalance, and they become, I call them super delegates, and that may sound great. It may sound like they're superheroes, but they're not. they're probably great people, but they should be representing approximately the same number of people as every other delegate should be. And so that to me is an imbalance, and is something that has been concerning to me since I've been chair. And it took a little while to recognize all the issues, but this is one of them. The other thing that it does is, and I'll get into a bunch of different other benefits as well, but the other thing that I'm really focused on is improving the effectiveness of the party. The party, we are twice as big as Utah County as far as the number of registered Republicans and precincts, and go on and on and on. And it's very, very hard to manage a party a county that's this large. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is find ways to kind of rein that back in. We have, in 2022, we had 795 total precincts. There was 786 where there were registered Republicans. That's why, but there's 795 precincts in 2022. Today, only 2 years, not even 2 years later, a year later, there's 913 precincts. And so we're just growing. And it's not because necessarily there's more Republicans. Those precincts are based on county tax districts, or water rights and different things like that. The county has to split it up in ways that really has nothing to do with the party, and has no benefit to the party. And so it really doesn't make sense to rely on the county for these precincts, but that's what we've done forever and ever and ever. So what I'd like to do, and this is me, Chris Knoll, as chair, I look at that 913 precincts, and I think if we had half of those precincts, that would be half the people that we'd have to communicate with to get to meetings, to get volunteers out, to get, help organize things. It sounds like, oh, wouldn't you want to have more? Well, I want to have more show up, yes. But if I have to communicate with twice as many people and manage twice as much data to communicate with those people, that just makes everybody's life harder. And so it would be really nice to get this down to a more manageable level. And so one of the things that the other counties have done in Salt Lake and in Utah is they've passed bylaws that allow them to merge their precincts in certain areas. Most of the counties, I looked at some of the ways that they're doing it, and one of the things I noticed is it's really kind of, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about other counties, but it's really just up to the executive committees or the chair to do it any way they want. They don't have a lot of guidelines. So the bylaw that I'm proposing does give some guidelines, and I think it does it in a way that's respectful to the process. Because we're Republicans because we believe in our platform principles. And if we can find a way to have equal or as close to equal as possible representation across the county, then what we're doing is we're properly representing all of the membership of the party. So let me get into this a little bit. The actual bylaw, and let me go ahead and share this. 1 second. There we go. So the actual bylaw, and I'll get into some of the other benefits afterwards, but the actual bylaw does a few things. In Article 6, we do have to make some exceptions in here to allow for the changes that are going to happen. So this is just an added exception. So basically, it's just saying the party districts shall coincide geographically with the election districts established by law, which is the county. Voting precinct shall be defined as a precinct with a registered voter residing in it, except as allowed in Article 8, Section 3J. And you'll see this a couple of times. We have to state that a few times because our current bylaws just worded it differently. So this is just some adjustment that allows for the main part of the bylaw change to take effect. So you'll see that there's a few places where that's at. There's 4, I believe. And then the next part is, this is Section 8. Let me see, let me go back up really quick. This is Section 8, I'm sorry, Article 8, Section 3. And if you go down to I, this is a piece of the change, or part of the change, where it basically says that candidates for those unfulfilled state delegate positions must reside within the same congressional district, state Senate district, state House district, and now state school board district. And that's because state school board is now a partisan election as well. So that was something that we needed to do because just recently the state passed a law making state school board a partisan race. So we need that as well. And this is not in the wording of the amendment, but I'm personally calling those districts an election district, meaning everybody who lives in that district has the same ballot when they show up, at least with regard to partisan races. And so that's kind of that's our first guardrail that we have in place, is these election districts. We should never combine precincts outside of election districts. And the reason for that is 2 reasons. One is that would skew the results of, let's say, a state race, or like a state Senate race, maybe that shares a border with another county. So if the state Senate district straddles 2 counties, and we put a bunch more delegates in our side, that may over strengthen that Senate district for Salt Lake County and kind of overpower, say, Tooele or Utah County or Davis County. And while that sounds great for Salt Lake County, it's not appropriate. So I just feel like that's a great guardrail that needs to be in place, and it just makes sense. We should be representing the people with the shared election, or within that shared election district. This goes on, and by the way, really quick, I want to give a shout out to Fred Cox, Nancy Lord, basically all the bylaw committee. They worked on this. They have a version that's also presented, is being presented by Fred Cox, and I really appreciate the work they did on this. And this is really their wording just with a few tweaks. And the tweaks that I'm making are to consolidate just a little bit more than they were willing to do. And they wanted to do minimal combinations, which would have been good it would have been a nice half step forward. But we're coming up on a really, really important 2024 race election year. And I just feel like this is the time that we need to make this change. And I don't see any reason not to make it. And so, and I'll get into a little bit more where I feel that this is appropriate. But the next part of this is in J. And this is really the crux of this bylaw amendment. It says, when the state Republican strength formula does not allocate at least 3 county delegates for a voting precinct, adjacent precincts may be combined for purposes of precinct caucus elections. This is really, really important. First of all, what is the state Republican strength formula? That is in the state party's constitution that we must use the state Republican strength formula. However, there's a problem. The state Republican strength formula does not work like 90% of the time. And when I say it doesn't work, it's because the state Republican strength formula says, well, let's look at all the precincts and let's see how they voted. And let's say one precinct, let's say precinct A voted 30% Republican and precinct B voted 90% Republican. Well, by that state the Republican strength formula, precinct B should get far more delegates than precinct A. Well, that's great, and it's based on specific races like governor, attorney general, certain races that only happen every 4 years. That's great, but the problem is that within those 4 years, our precinct boundaries change. And because we don't know as a party how each individual voted, all we know is that they did vote or not. That doesn't make any sense, because if that line moves over and where they had voted 90% Republican and only 30% Republican on this side, that line moves over, I no longer know how those two precincts or what the strength is in either of those precincts. Now it's a complete guessing game. And I just think that's inappropriate. And really what it results in is us, well, it's not even possible, first of all. But if I would try to make a guessing game out of it and say, okay, well, it was this percentage and try to do all that. First of all, it's a ton of work, but it's a guessing game. And it's also inappropriate because now I'm representing not just party members, but I'm representing everybody in those precincts. And look, the reason why we're a party is because we unite on our party principles that's in our platform. And so my approach is a little bit different, and I'll get into it in just a second. My approach, well, I'll explain when we get down further, but my approach is different. It's truly to represent Republicans. So the next part of this is does not allocate. So if a precinct using that formula doesn't allocate at least 3 county delegates for voting precinct, then adjacent precincts may be combined for purposes of precinct caucus elections. Well, there were over, and I don't remember the exact number, but there was quite a few. I'll say about 200. Let's just say precincts that did not allocate, or didn't have enough allocation to achieve even one delegate. In other words, they weren't strong enough to achieve it. They achieved a portion of a delegate. And you do this, the math is you divide the total number of delegates or total number of precincts by total number of delegates and how they voted and all that. And so it really just doesn't make sense that you're giving, and I failed to mention one other thing. In our current bylaws, it says that we have to give every precinct, or everyone must be represented, right? So every precinct had to have one delegate. So if they didn't earn a full delegate, but we're giving them anyway, what that does is it takes delegates away from our strongest precincts in the county, and it gives them to these precincts that aren't strong enough to sustain a single delegate. And so the reason for not just saying, well, why don't we just do it at 1? And that's what the bylaws committee said is, why don't we just do it if they can't achieve 1, then why don't we just combine those? The problem with that is it didn't combine very many. And it didn't get us down to achieve the second goal that I'm looking for, and that's to improve the operation, the efficiency of the party. It did a little bit, but it just really wasn't sufficient to really make an impact. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. But the combined precincts then must maintain a proportional delegate. This is the important part. This is what I really like. The combined precinct, so after they've been combined, must maintain a proportional delegate to registered Republican ratio. So this is kind of a new algorithm that we're using. And what this means is that those combined precincts should have, it's not going to be perfect because it's never going to be perfect, but it should have a fairly even ratio of delegates to registered Republicans. So, and if I did the math today, I've got brand new numbers from the county clerk. That would be right around, I believe it's 157. It depends on how many delegates we decide to allocate this year. But if we do 1,500 delegates, which is what we, it's kind of the average, then it'll be 157 registered Republicans per delegate. And that will be across the county. So it's nice because every delegate will represent approximately the same number of registered Republicans. And by the way, they're active registered Republicans. So that it talks about that in a minute. So that's gonna. So I didn't finish the sentence. So delegate to registered Republican ratio as the rest of the county precincts and shall reside within the same partisan district or election district is what I call them, and shall have county delegate and state delegate representation. So nothing else changes. It just gives us the ability to combine those precincts. And it allows us to make that proportional delegate to registered Republican ratio somewhat equal across the county. Those are the guardrails. This is what makes this okay. I'm not going to go off the rails. No future chair can go off the rails. No future executive committee can go off the rails on this. And by the way, I don't get to decide. I'm not the final decision maker. I'm the one who probably puts together the plan. Me and my officers, but the executive committee has to approve anything that we do. So that means the region chairs and Senate district chairs, and then the officers all get together and they all have to approve this. And so there's representation in that vote across the entire county. Every portion of the county gets a fairly equal representation in that decision. So really, you just can't go off the rails. You're not going to get a chair who's going to say, oh, we got to move all the delegates to one side and overpower and win this race over here because of, it's just not going to happen because these guardrails are in place. The next part's really important as well. I mentioned before that the Republican strength formula doesn't work most of the time, to be perfectly honest. So, and this goes back to some wording that Fred came up with, which I really like. I think it was Fred, might have been somebody else, but I think it was Fred. When the state party relative Republican strength formula cannot be calculated due to redistricting, which is the problem I mentioned, or other precinct boundary changes, I won't get into all that, but there's a couple different scenarios. The number of active registered Republican voters will be used. So in other words, we don't have to worry about how people voted. We just worry about, are they active registered Republicans? Now I'll show you in just a second. I've got a chart that shows how often the relative Republican strength or the Republican strength formula actually functions. It doesn't function most of the time. And so I think, so if you take a 20-year period, I believe it works 4 years of those 20. So again, we'll probably be using the active registered Republican algorithm more than the other one in most cases. And then this last part is just really changing that letter so that everything shifts down in this bylaw. So that's the whole bylaw. But I want to get into some of the other reasons why this is so important. One of the things that we noticed in the last few years, and by the way, I'm going to take questions in a minute, but let me go over this a little bit. One of the other problems that we noticed is, I mentioned the broken relative Republican strength algorithm, but this low precinct caucus meeting attendance. We had a ton of precinct caucus meetings where nobody attended. And the reason for that is because nobody lived in those precincts, or there was very few active registered Republicans who lived in those precincts. And, if you have, less than 50 or, whatever, it's very likely you're not going to get anybody to attend. And so again, combining those precincts so that we have better attendance is better. One of the things I had a woman mention to me, she doesn't like attending her caucus meeting because too often she finds herself either alone in the room or she finds herself alone with people a few people she doesn't know, or she feels that they're a little not her style, and it's uncomfortable. Well, I don't want that to happen. If we're going to come together as a caucus, as a neighborhood, there should be enough people that everybody feels comfortable, and that when you vote, you're voting as a whole. There's true representation in the vote. It's not one or two people from the precinct. It's a group of people. My hope is that we never have less than 30 or 40 people to vote for their delegates. That's, to me, that would be good representation. It means that the party's truly speaking more when they represent their delegates. Imagine one person walks into a room and they're the only person. Imagine there's three people that walk into a room and they're the only ones who attend the caucus meeting. What usually happens? They say, okay, who wants to be the delegate? Okay, who wants to be the precinct chair? Okay, who wants to do this? Right? And that's not representative in any way. In fact, it's disappointing to hear when that happens. And I've heard that story way too many times. So this is going to help with that. The precincts will be larger geographically, but they will be on average the same as every other precinct in the county as far as active registered Republicans. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but you might have a precinct that only has 2 delegates, or 4, one that has 4 delegates, and that's true. But remember, the ratio is there, and again, there's that guardrail. So even if there is 600 active registered Republicans in one precinct, which would be equivalent to about 4 delegates, versus another precinct that maybe we could only get 150 active registered Republicans in that precinct, and they only get 1 delegate. The point is that delegate represents approximately the same number of people as the larger precincts, and they live within their own election district. So the guardrails are there. We have good participation in caucus meetings. We never have an empty room, hopefully never have an empty room. And we eliminate these low caucus meeting turnouts, and hopefully it's more inviting as well. So another problem that we have is these headaches, where what happened is if nobody shows into a precinct, nobody gets elected to be a delegate, we have what's called a failed to fill, and these are specifically to the state delegate positions. So if you were at the county convention in 2022, we had, and I think it was 170, I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot of these failed to fill state delegate positions. And what we have to do is we have to hold an election for those within their House district. So the problem with that is we had one House district, or I think it was 22. Is that right, Karma? 22 delegates we had to fill? 42. Okay. Yeah. And that meeting, I think it was 2 or 3 hours long just to fill those delegate positions, because there were so many. It got confusing. It was super hard to manage. Scott Rosenbush did an amazing job. He did the best he could. I know there were some complaints. It wasn't his fault. It was just out of control. We can't have that happening again. So if we have larger precincts, we get representation in every precinct. Hopefully we don't have any failed to fill state delegate positions, and we don't have to hold any of those county convention meetings trying to fill those. We'll probably have to hold a few here and there. Maybe somebody, I don't know. There's some scenarios where that could happen, and that's okay. I don't mind a few, but I don't want 42 in a single House district. That's crazy. And then I mentioned before the inefficiency of party communications. That's a real thing. It's really, really hard. Karma knows, she's always trying to get communications out there. It's hard to communicate with 913 precinct chairs, plus 913 vice chairs, plus the secretaries, plus the treasurers, plus all the delegates. And when you start adding all that up and you're trying to get a message out, believe it or not, it's incredibly hard to do when you've got that many people. You think it's the same message. How hard could it be? Well, we got to maintain all those email addresses. We've got to maintain all those phone numbers. And when some of those people decide to move, we have to go back and fill all those positions. And a lot of times the ones that are moving are the ones in the precincts where it was hard to fill them in the first place. So it creates just an overwhelming amount of work to function and to be effective. So if we can reduce that, it probably won't be in half, but if we can get it down, 500, 550, I'd love to see 450. Utah County, I believe, is at 400 or so, 430, something like that, precincts. if we can get it down to that, that would be amazing. So much easier to manage. And then one other thing, and this is something that a lot of people have been complaining about. When we have an open room, when we have an open caucus meeting room, anybody can walk in from that precinct, sign their name and say, I'm the delegate, I'm the precinct chair and I'm the delegate. And what we've learned is, and I'm got to be careful what I say because I don't want to accuse anybody, but that's where the party switchers are coming from. And we saw this on Twitter. We saw some people brag about it. They actually posted on Twitter a picture of themselves standing there, and I think they didn't have vote for Biden buttons on Karma, and they talked about how they just walked right in, became the delegate, and clearly they don't represent the party or our principles. And when they became the delegates and they went to convention, they can vote any way they want, and there's nothing we can do as a party once that happens. So this kind of eliminates that, right? Because if you've got a room full of people and somebody comes in with a Biden badge, or the neighborhood knows them and says, hey, you don't represent Republicans, now that's not going to happen, right? At least it's not going to happen as often. They can always lie, but it's going to happen less often. And that's our job as precinct attendees. It's our job to vet those people out. But if nobody's there to vet them out, we're going to get party switchers every time. It's going to cause problems. And, this is something that I think this is a big step in the right direction to fix this. So that's the main reasons I want to get this done. So, I'm trying to promote fair representation, provide an alternate to the relative Republican strength algorithm that does not work today most of the time. I'm trying to improve the caucus attendance. Also, I want to say this: if we can get all the precinct chairs filled, and they get elected by their precinct, now they actually feel like they have some accountability, right? They feel like I've got to get to the CCM meetings. I've got to go represent my precinct. Whereas right now, if you notice, we get what do you think? A quarter?
I'd say about 25 to 30%.
Yeah. Okay. So 25 to 30% of the precinct chairs are attending today. It's kind of frustrating as officers, right? We do our best. We send out postcards. We do text messages. We send out emails. We don't know if you guys are getting those emails, but we do. At least we think you're getting your postcards. We think you're getting your text messages. But we do everything we can. And if we can improve that attendance because we've got less people to communicate with, and we've got more precinct chairs filling those positions from the get-go, then, and we can get, I'd love to be up to 75, 80% attendance of our CCM, even if that means less precinct chairs, because that's better representation. I mentioned the state delegates. We're going to hopefully that solves it. The failed to fill positions streamlines the functionality, and then security, independence, basically no more party switchers, right? Let's try to eliminate that. I think it's inappropriate. Not only is it inappropriate, but it's it really messes up the whole party system. And I think it's part of the deterioration that we're seeing here in Utah, where a lot of people say, well, the party doesn't really represent me anymore. Yeah, well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is why. And I firmly believe that that's a big part of it. And hopefully we can solve this. So that's the whole why I'd like to see this happen. I'm really hoping that we can get some good support on this. And if you've got any questions, I got to switch here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I do have some numbers that I can show. I know there was a lot of questions the last time we streamed, but let me see if there's any questions. Karma, you have some questions that you...
Yeah, there's one question. Oh, I think I just lost it. Want to know if there was a buffer, like up to 10%. And I think it was around your average.
Okay, yeah. So that's there isn't a buffer. I think that's something that's hard to do because there's some situations where precincts will be in areas where there's just not going to be an exact average. It's going to be as good as we can do it, right? And so if you've ever run through the process, you realize it's a little messy. But I think we can get pretty close. A buffer would be hard to do. There's going to be some outlier precincts where they're just not. So one of the things about that bylaw is it said it had to be adjacent to other precincts. Well, we've got some precincts that are just really out there, and they're not really adjacent to another precinct just because I don't know how it works, but there's anyway. I don't know. We're gonna do the best we can as an executive committee, as officers, but there will be outliers. So, but I'll tell you what, compared to what we're doing today, it's a lot better. It's going to be 10, 100 times better than what we're doing today. So, and I'm not saying that any chairs in the past or what we've done in the past was wrong. It was really, really hard to do based on the current rules. But that's a great question. If there's a way we can figure that out, I'm happy to do it. But I think as long as we have those guardrails that I mentioned earlier, I think even though we have a few outliers like that, it's only going to be a handful, and it's not going to be a majority. But that's a great question. What other questions are there, Karma?
That's all that I've seen right now.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the spreadsheet. And then there might be some other questions come up from that. So when I got the new data from the county clerk, I immediately started working on this. Let's see if I can make this a little bit. Is that readable? More or less. It's some of it's jumbled up, but here we go. Can you see that, Karma?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is the new data that we got from the county clerk. It's a breakdown of how many registered party members for each party. Republicans are still, a large majority. Democrats are a little more than half of what we are. And then you got this huge unaffiliated. And I want to call that out a little bit. I think my belief is that the unaffiliateds are really, if they looked at our party platform, and if they believed that we represented our party platform, they would probably join back to the Republican Party. I'm not saying all of them, but a large percentage of them would. Certainly more than they would rejoin the Democrat Party, I think. So this is an area that I think is important. And I'm hoping that this change will help them to see that we as a party are truly representing our membership. And the outcome should be that we have better, we nominate better candidates to represent us in federal races and county races and state races. And my hope is they say, hey, maybe the party does represent me again, and that we can bring them back in. So this is part of the one of the things I'd like to see happen. You can read into some other things here, but I won't get into too much of that. I do think that there's some interesting things that are happening, but I won't get into all that. Like I said before, in 2022, there was 795 total precincts. Only 786 of those actually had registered Republicans in them. And like I said, 10 of them had one registered Republican, so we had to give them a delegate. That made no sense. Today we have 913, so there's quite a few more. And unfortunately, if we don't get this bylaw passed, that means we're going to be in the same boat as in 20. That's actually going to be worse than 2022. And we're going to have to allocate one delegate to every single one of those 913 that have any registered Republicans in it. And then because of that, and let me show you, well, let's see if I can show that here. Because of that, there's going to be precincts that'll have that massive ratio where they'll have like 325 registered Republicans for every delegate, and then the precincts that have like a 1-to-1, or even if it's 20-to-1, that's still not a good ratio compared to 325-to-1, right? So hopefully we fix that. And so I kind of did some of the math here. If we allocate 1,500 county delegates, which I think is a good number, and I'll get into that a little bit and why I think that's a good number. But if we do 1,500 delegates, then that would be an average 157 registered Republicans per delegate. And the way that I figure that out is I look at all of the total number of registered Republicans, and I divide it by the number of delegates that get allocated. So, but in 2022, just so you understand, we had 1,800 delegates allocated, and so that would have been 131 on average. But I'm going to push for 1,500. We'll see what the executive committee decides. It's really up to the executive committee, not up to me. But that's my hope, is that we do 1,500. And why? Why would I want less delegates? The reason is, and I've talked to a lot of candidates about this, the goal of the party or the purpose of the party is to nominate candidates for each of these races that truly represent our principles. Well, if I'm a candidate, one of the benefits of going through the caucus convention system and being a Republican is that I don't have to have a lot of money. I just have to have really good ideas. My value is in my ideas and my ability to execute those ideas. It shouldn't be how much money is in my pocket or how much money I can raise. Obviously, we do need to raise money, and we'd love to help the candidates do that once they become nominees. But it would be nice if we had the right nominee first. And so, if we do, more delegates, what happens is that candidate has to communicate with more delegates. So, for example, let's say in my precinct, or not my precinct, my House district, in 2022, my House district had 81 delegates. That's kind of a lot of people to go and talk to. Now, it doesn't change a lot in 2024. It goes down to 79. But one of the things that a lot of people like to, if we don't have this amendment in place that I'm working on, what they say is, well, the way that we offset the party switchers and this no turnout is we double the delegates. And so then look what happens. Those same candidates, instead of having to talk to 79 delegates, now they have to talk to 158. And that's, to me, that doesn't make sense. We don't have many venues that can fit all the delegates in for county convention. It can fit 3,000 plus delegates at county convention. That's super expensive. B, again, communications. That's really hard to communicate with that many delegates. C, as a candidate, I'm just not going to be able to communicate with that many delegates and truly have a good conversation with them. I want them to ask me personal questions. I want them to ask me questions that really draw out who I am as a Republican. But if I've got 158 people to communicate with versus 79, well, that's just not going to happen. So that's why I like to see that lower number. Same thing with the state delegates. However, with the state delegates, we don't get to decide that. That comes from the state party. They allocate a certain number of delegates per county, and that's a whole nother process. We don't have control over that. This is the number we had in 2022. I expect it'll be similar, but I don't know if it's going to go up or down. But that's the reason why I'd like to see that lower number of delegates to make it easier on the candidates so that they can truly communicate with delegates without having to spend a ton of money to do it. So I hope that makes sense. The other thing, let's see. Okay, so this is something else I wanted to show you. This one doesn't show it very well. Let me go to a different screen. I'm going to stop sharing again. And I'm going to share something that's on. If anybody was at the state convention, I actually, last minute, because it finally occurred to me what was happening. Last minute, I tried to do something similar at the state level. I thought we had to fix it at the state level, but we didn't. I realized later, thanks to Fred and Nancy and the bylaws committee. I keep saying Fred and Nancy. There's a lot of people in the bylaws committee: Matt McPherson, Jordan Tusher, Danielle On. I'm missing somebody.
Ron Spratling.
Ron Spratling. Is there one? There's like, get them all, or is there somebody else? Anyway, if you remember, Karma, please.
Belinda Johnson.
Oh yeah, Belinda Johnson. Sorry guys, you're awesome. I really do appreciate you. But they all showed me that, hey, we can accomplish this at the county level. But when I was looking at it at the state level, and I thought this was the only way to do it, I was identifying problems, right? So what if we look at our regions? In the North region, our delegate ratio was 135 per delegate, right? But the crazy thing was, in the North region, we only had 10.56% of all of the GOP voters. So their ratio should have been, well, maybe the ratio is okay, but it should have been much less. It wasn't a proper allocation. It wasn't a good ratio to registered Republicans. So if you looked at the highest, which was the Southwest, they had 26.8%. But percentage wise, that ratio was way off. So if that's green, that should be green, right? It should be equal. And let me show you something else here. This is by House district, and you can see how these, again, it doesn't match up. And then we have this app that we call Zoho, and this is what we do to manage all of our contacts in the party. And it's kind of hard to see in this screen, but what helped me identify was, if you look down at this side, down at the bottom half of this map, this is where every one of our delegates lives. And what I noticed is they're really kind of spaced out. You can see the full head of all the delegates, right? But if you look up here, they're really scrunched in. Well, that means more of our delegates live up north, where we have the least representation of the party, or least number of Republicans. And so this is what it was literally this map. And I'm looking at it going, why are there so many delegates in this one little area where we have the least number of Republicans? How has that happened? Well, it's because of the relative Republican strength algorithm. That's just, it was great when it was first presented to the party. And I know a little bit of history. It was explained to me not too long ago that back in the day, you didn't used to register to a party. You would just kind of show up and vote for that party, but you didn't register for the party. So they had to use the relative Republican strength by the way people voted. But back then, precincts didn't change hardly at all. Now they change almost yearly, and we just can't keep up with, it just doesn't work. And so, but back then it did, and that's fine. And I'm glad it did then. And to be honest with you, in most counties, precincts don't change very often at all. It's only Salt Lake County where we're constantly growing, constantly changing, and so rapid that it affects us in a very negative way. So anyway, so these are some of the reasons why I realized, we've got to fix this. Yeah, I mean, you can go to the website, and by the way, I left this up there only because I had created all these charts and things where I had figured out what was going on, and I didn't want to take it down because it's good information, and I wanted to be able to use that in the future, like today, and show it. So here's an example. There's 1 delegate to 7 voting Republicans versus 1 delegate to 325 voting Republicans, and this chart shows that. It makes no sense when you start looking at that. Are there any other questions, Karma?
I don't see any. No.
We're quiet tonight. The last time we did this, we had a lot of good questions. Try to remember what they were, but this is one other chart. This is the relative Republican strength. So the current state party bylaw or actually constitution rule that says that so basically after every governor, AG, was it governor's race? Oh, here it is. Governor's race, AG, auditor, and treasurer. You combine all of those races and you see how each precinct voted. Well, great. So in 2020, we had the governor's race. Well, in 2020, they also did the census. So by 2022, when we could apply that race, the results of that race, well, all the precincts had changed. We had redistricting. None of it applied. There was no way to apply the 2020 race data to the 2022 elections. So that didn't work. Well, we still haven't had a governor's race in 2024, which is coming up since then. And so again, we can't apply those numbers to 2024. So that's two election years where that doesn't work. Because we are going to have a governor, or, the governor, AG, auditor, and treasurer race in 2024. Well, 2026, in theory, we can apply the relative Republican strength. But I say in theory because we weren't expecting a redistricting in 2023, but in March we had one, and that's because tax districts and things like that change. And so, assuming nothing changes between 2024 and 2026, then maybe the relative Republican strength algorithm will work, and that's fine. If it does, perfect, happy to do it. But if it doesn't, then we're in the same boat as 2022 and 2024, and we're basically breaking our own rules, and we're just trying to wing it. And I don't want to be in that position. I don't think that's a good position for the party. But you can see how, as you go down, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 years out of a 20-year period where in theory that relative Republican strength algorithm works. But again, it's just in theory, because if precincts change, borders change, it doesn't. So yeah, the alternate, which is what we're proposing, it does work every single time, because even if a person moves from one precinct to another, or the precinct boundaries change, we know where the active registered Republican lives. We can adjust, make the adjustments just before caucus. We adjust the delegates appropriately, and we're back in business. So it will work every single year with this method. So I'm excited to see it. I hope it happens. I need your support. I need you to help vote for it. I know there's a few naysayers. There's a few people who are against it. Arguments, excuse me. A couple of the arguments were that you're creating super precincts. Well, what does that mean? Okay, maybe it is a big precinct with more delegates, but if it's still representing the same average number of registered Republicans, and then they still live in the same electoral district, who cares? They don't have an inordinate, am I saying that right? Inordinate power over another registered Republican. And we're not shifting the delegates around, we're merging. So it's really, call them a super precinct or not, it doesn't really mean anything, because it's still a better representation, and more equal, fair representation than what we've got today. So I disagree with that argument. I'd say, in fact, the bigger problem is right now we have super delegates who represent less people. They really represent themselves more than they represent their precincts, and so I'd like to get rid of that. I think that's inappropriate. What other arguments are there, Karma? Can you think of some that we might bring up?
I'm thinking, I think you've covered, I mean, the points, all of the problems and how we intend to solve them. So I think you've covered it.
Okay. Pocket precinct. I just saw the comments here. Pocket precincts for super delegate. Yeah, exactly. They're pocket precincts, right? And I'm not going to bash on the Democrat Party or any other party right now, but there are some practices that some other parties use to give more power to certain individuals or certain groups intentionally. And that's, I don't know if it's for donations or they just preference. I don't know what the real reasoning is, but I think this, we've got the right board, I'm trying to say the right rules in place to keep that from happening. And if we can improve it down the road, great. But I don't think we can wait. 2024 needs to be successful. We need to represent the party. We need to be successful. We need to be stronger. We need to be better, and we need to be more principled as a party. And I think that this is a way to do it. So again, please support this amendment. Help us out. Talk to your other friends who are precinct chairs, those who are going to vote on Saturday, and let them know that we're not doing this for our sake. We're not doing it for anybody else. It's really it's to help the party as a whole. And I truly believe that our party needs to represent the people far more than it does today. I love what the purpose of our party, and that's representation. That's to promote our values. And the best way to do that is to get somewhat equal representation across the board. And I'll tell you, I love our country. I love our state. I love our party. I love our county. And I hope that this all makes sense. I was at an event last night, and I'll just tell you, I was really impressed by some of the speakers, some of the things that they were talking about, and how we can do better as a party. We can find ways to improve and focus on the positives, and I really like to do that. Especially, this is my last year and a half or whatever of being chair, and then I guess I'm gonna say it publicly. I can't run next time, and so we have term limits, and not that I really want to be honest with you. I'm worn out, but I'd love to leave something like this that's good for the party, and I'd love to I'd love to see the positive in the party going forward that'll come out of this. And anyway, thank you for being on this, for watching. Hope to see you this Saturday. Hope you're able to help us out with caucus. I hope caucus is an amazing event this year, or this in 2024. By the way, it's going to be on March 5th, and convention is April 26th. As a county convention is April 26th, and state convention, Karma, I always forget.
No, county is April 13th. State is
sorry.
April 27th.
Sorry. Yes, I keep doing that. So one more time, Karma. County
convention is April 13th.
April 13th.
State convention is April 27th.
Right. So yeah, we get those those dates in your calendar now. Plan on being at caucus March 5th. We got a couple more minutes. I'm going to tell you a couple other little things that we're working on. I've been meeting I've had maybe 5 meetings this week already, trying to, thank you for putting it in there, in the comments. I've had a bunch of meetings trying to figure out ways to do the check-in faster. We're going to do some early online credentialing for caucus, so you can go online days in advance. Hopefully 30 days in advance is my goal, or up to 30 days in advance, and check in online, so that when you walk into caucus, you'll get an email as soon as you credential online. You'll get an email back or a text message back. We haven't decided which yet, and it's going to say which school you go to and which classroom you go to. So then you just walk in, you go straight to your precinct. You'll show your ID and your credential. We'll probably have you printed out. There's some other ideas as well, but you just show your ID, say, "Yep, I'm credentialed." We'll be able to confirm that, and then what'll happen is you won't have to stand in line to go get into your precinct caucus meeting. You'll be able to just walk in and be ready to go. If we can get even half of the people attending to do that, it would be amazing, and it would really improve the caucus experience, especially with this being a presidential preference year. We're expecting a big turnout, and we want as many people to attend as possible, and we don't want the complaints afterwards saying, "Oh, I had to wait in line for an hour and I missed half the caucus meeting." I don't want any of that to happen. And then have them walk into an empty precinct room. So get rid of all that. We're trying to solve these problems. I've met with a number of companies who are working really hard to help us and to improve caucus and to make it successful. So, but it's going to rely on you too. You are the precinct chairs. You're the ones doing some things, doing the things that are actually going to make this work. So we have the ideas, but we need you to be there to do it. Clarence Witchell, when is caucus? So that's March 5th. And I'm going to start saying now it's at 6 p.m. And we always say 7 p.m. because that's when the caucus meeting is supposed to start. But I don't want people showing up at 7 p.m. because what happens is everyone shows up 15 minutes ahead of time and expects to be checked in. I do think we'll solve it with the online, or it'll improve with the online credentialing in advance. But I don't want to take a chance at having people show up at 7 and have a line anyway, right? And we're trying to get rid of that. Rose, thank you. It was informative. Appreciate that. I know that's Susan S. Bartan. Chris, any chance we can pitch the idea of transparency in delegate votes, publishing which delegates voted for who during the convention? So I know, Susan, we had that conversation. I still love the idea of reporting who attended, but I had somebody come to me and talk to me about the problem with reporting how they voted. And it didn't occur to me until they brought it up to me. And this is, I don't necessarily want to say it publicly because I don't want to offend. Well, okay, here's what I'll say is, let's say that I go out there, I show up to convention and I vote for somebody who, let's say one of the candidates is maybe the CEO of the company I work for, which has happened recently. And I don't want to vote for them. I want to vote for the other guy. Well, if my vote becomes public, what happens, right? And that's that's kind of an extreme example, but there's more examples like that. And as I started talking to people, I realized that's probably not the best idea. But I definitely want to make sure that every precinct is told who attended and who didn't. That we can absolutely do. If there's something else we can do to improve transparency without risking their careers or their livelihoods, then yeah, we'll work on it. But I think that's a tough one, and I pitched that to you, not having heard the other side, and now that I think about it more, I think. I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure something out. Carmen, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, can I add something to that? And
Yeah.
and again, I think there's still more conversations to happen around this because again, we can see both sides of it. But I think to say a precinct represents their precinct. I mean, a delegate represents their precinct, not the whole county. So I don't think it's appropriate to publish them for the whole county to see. It is probably appropriate on some level for the members of that caucus to know how their delegate voted, but and there's ways to do that without a formal process, without posting it online. So I think there are some ways we should be able to kind of satisfy privacy, but also make sure that you're represented. So there's some more conversations to happen, but I think there's some things that can happen.
Well, and one other thing so you kind of reminded me of another aspect of this. When you're vetting your delegates, say, hey, we want a delegate who's going to report back to us. And if they report back, great, that's up to them to do, right? And that way they might feel more comfortable rather than being online, or maybe they'll send out an email, who knows, right? Whatever they feel more comfortable doing. And then I think that becomes more appropriate. One of the things, and actually this goes back to and I'll answer your other question here in a second, Susan, but when I first brought this up to somebody, they said, well, that's exactly what happened in a recent race, and people felt bullied, and so they feel that the outcome was skewed because the delegates, or they said that the delegates were bullied. So we had a recent experience where there's people questioning the outcome of a race because of that very thing. And so I had to go back and say, yeah, okay, you're right. And it to this day, people are making that comment. I don't want to get into the race and all that stuff, but it is true that is the feeling, that is the sentiment. And so I think there's got to be a better solution, or there has to be a solution out there, but that may not be the right one. Maybe we could make, maybe we can make it voluntary on the part of the delegate. Absolutely should be voluntary. And as a precinct, if you're not okay with a delegate that won't share, that says, no, I'm not sharing my vote, well, then don't vote for them, right? Vote for a different delegate, right? But leave it up to them. Ultimately, leave it up to the precinct, I should say, to make that decision. Not shouldn't be pressured to it. Your other question, there it is. Also, will we be taking a chunk of the time reading through the platform? I hate that. I mean, don't take that wrong. I love the platform, but it takes so long to get through. Where I'm going to see if there isn't a better way to go through the platform in a way that's quick. It's rough, right? Because it can take quite a while to get through the platform. It's all super important though too. So I mean, I would rather err on the side of reading the platform, but if there's a way we can do it kind of quickly, then we'll figure out, we'll find something. But I'm open to suggestions, by the way. When I say these things, you guys see me struggling with, answering, that means send me your ideas, because I'll listen to them and we'll see if it makes sense and if it's doable. We get tons of ideas. Not everything is we can't act on everything just because, the nature of the situation, but if we can, we will. And if it makes sense, we will. So send us your ideas. I know, Susan, you've been amazing. I appreciate some of the training you've done recently and the work that you've done. And I appreciate all of our delegates and all of our precinct chairs and delegates, and House district chairs and region chairs and Senate district chairs. You guys are all amazing. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. We've gone over just a little bit, but last thing I do want to say is, Karma, what are the elections that we're going to have on Saturday?
We have 3 Senate chairs, 10, 12, and 22. And I want to say two of those, 2.5. We have an acting Senate chair, and when I say half, he was just barely asked and hasn't been ratified. So
okay,
But that doesn't mean that they are the ones. It's open for anyone in that district to run and to run for that seat. But they do need to be ratified. They do need to be voted for here so that they can take on the full responsibilities of the duties of the Senate chair. And an appointed midterm or appointment does not. And so we really need to get these positions filled. So if you are in one of those districts, well, come to CCM even if you're not. But if you are, for sure, come. And if you know someone who would be really good at filling one of those positions, then bring them along. They don't have to be a member of the Central Committee to run for these positions, but they do need to be registered Republican and live within that Senate district.
Yep. Yeah, and thank you for saying that, because I do know of a couple of people who are not precinct chairs, they're not CCM members, that are going to be running, and that's great. We should be doing that more often. So, and by the way, it's easier because we don't have to backfill those positions.
Yeah.
Last thing I actually want to bring up really quick. I know we're really over now, but on November 8th, we have our E-Club luncheon, and that's going to be Carson Jorgensen. And we're going to be at Tushers Brazilian barbecue in South Jordan. So the invite goes out to all of our E-Club members. If you are not an E-Club member and you'd like to become an E-Club member, just go to our website. Let me bring this up really quick. Go to our main page on our website, or actually, you don't even have to go to the main page, but you can just go to the donate right here, and that'll take you to this page. You just have to, it's $10 a month to be invited to E-Club. If you say, hey, I'd love to attend E-Club, but I can't do the $10 per month, show up, give us a donation for the $10 that month. You do pay for your own lunch, so we don't do that. But come here, Carson. Last month we had Phil Lyman. Prior to that, let's see, we had Trent Staggs one month. We had Mark Strong. I don't know. We've had some really good, and these are great conversations, by the way, that we've had. The things that you learn from the processes that they go through and the bills that they've passed and things, it's really, really good. So please come, please donate, please join the E-Club. You get your pin. I'm not wearing mine right now. I should have worn mine for this. You get your pin, and you get invited to all the E-Club luncheons, and they're on Wednesday, the second Wednesday of every month. And appreciate all those who donate, because you're the ones who make the party function. You're paying for the resources that I try really hard not to overspend, and we do our best to use those resources appropriately. So thank you all. Thanks for joining. Well, let's end it now. And we'll see you on Saturday.